13 minutes doesn't sound like a long time until you spend it handcuffed in the back of a police car watching red and blue lights bounce off the glass like you're trapped inside somebody else's emergency. And yeah, that happened. That actually happened to me. And the wildest part is, it all started with two numbers typed wrong. I remember every second of that night like it's burned into film, the smell of plastic from the seat, the low hum of the engine, the way the cuffs pressed into my wrists like they were trying to memorize my bones. And up front, this officer sat there staring at his computer screen, like I wasn't even a person behind him, just a problem he hadn't solved yet. The crazy thing is, I wasn't speeding, I wasn't swerving, I wasn't doing anything except driving to grab coffee before finishing paperwork, and next thing I know, those lights flash behind me, and I pull into a gas station. Because that's what you're supposed to do, right? You cooperate, you stay visible, you keep your hands where they can see them, you do everything they tell you growing up will keep you safe. I rolled my window down before he even stepped out. Hands on the wheel, posture, straight, calm face, the whole routine, and he sat in his cruiser for almost a full minute just watching me through the windshield, like I was a scene he didn't trust yet. Then he finally got out, hand hovering near his holster, not grabbing it but letting me know he could. And when he got to my window, he didn't say hello or good evening or anything human like that, just license and registration, flat voice, no explanation, and I asked why I'd been pulled over, because that's a reasonable question, you know what I mean, and he repeated it again, like a robot, license and registration. So I told him I was reaching for my purse, slow movements, clear voice, because you learn early, you narrate everything you do in moments like that. I got my wallet, handed him my license. He stared at it longer than felt normal. Then he said, "Step out of the vehicle," and that's the exact second the air changed. I stepped out, hands visible, calm, and he says, "This vehicle was reported stolen," and I actually blinked because for a second I thought he was joking. I told him, "This car is registered to me," and he didn't respond, didn't check, didn't radio anyone, just said turn around like the decision had already been made somewhere in his head before he even walked up. There was a guy pumping gas nearby and I heard him mutter something like, "That's crazy," and the officer ignored him. And I stood there for half a second thinking, maybe he'd correct himself, maybe he'd realize he mixed something up, but he didn't. So I turned around slowly and put my hands behind my back and the cuffs clicked shut, cold metal, tight, final. And that sound stays with you longer than you expect. He guided me to the cruiser, opened the back door, and I ducked inside, plastic seat metal divider. No seatbelt door slams, and suddenly you're not a driver anymore, you're a detainee, just like that, like flipping a switch. Outside I could see at least 5 or 6 phones pointed at the car, people recording, nobody saying anything, just watching. And inside he started typing on his computer while I sat there, upright wrists pressed together, breathing steady because I already knew something he didn't know yet, and that was this wasn't going to end the way he thought it would. Minutes passed, real slow, the kind of slow where you can hear your pulse in your ears. He kept typing, stopping typing again, and I didn't speak, didn't argue, didn't tell him what I did for a living, didn't threaten him with anything. I just waited, because sometimes silence makes people show you exactly who they are. Around minute 13, his typing changed, slowed down. I saw his shoulders lift, then drop. He re-entered the plate number more carefully, and I knew right then he'd made a mistake. You can feel that shift when somebody realizes they messed up but hasn't figured out how to say it yet. He sat there staring at the screen for a few seconds, then finally stepped out, came around, opened the back door, and the gas station lights hit my face, and he said, quieter now, "There's been a mistake." I didn't move. I just looked at him and said, "Your badge number," and he hesitated but read it off. Then I asked for his supervisor's name. He gave it. Then he unlocked the cuffs, and they fell away, and my wrists had deep red marks circling them like bracelets I never asked for. He muttered something about a typo, said, "Sorry," like he was reading it off a cue card. And I told him calmly, "You cuffed me before verifying," and he didn't answer, just stood there shifting his weight. I walked to my SUV, grabbed my phone, took pictures of my wrists, his badge, his patrol car number, and he didn't stop me, probably because he knew he shouldn't have stopped me in the first place. Then I asked him to confirm the plate had been entered incorrectly. He nodded, said yes, and that was it. No shouting, no scene. I got in my car and drove away, slow, steady, same way I'd arrived. But here's where the story actually starts, because I didn't go home. I drove downtown to the federal building, walked past security, took the elevator up, and stepped into an office where someone I trusted was still working late. I put my phone on his desk, showed him the photos, and said I needed traffic stop data for that officer going back years, and he didn't ask questions, just pulled it up. And 20 minutes later, the numbers were sitting there glowing on the screen like they'd been waiting for someone to notice them. Thousands of stops, most involving black drivers. Huge percentage, way out of proportion. Then another data set showed dozens of stolen vehicle stops that turned out not to be stolen at all, almost all involving black drivers again, and the room got real quiet, the kind of quiet where you don't even hear the air conditioner anymore. We pulled complaint records, next more numbers, same pattern, cases closed. Insufficient evidence over and over, and I remember resting my hands on the back of the chair in front of me and thinking about those 13 minutes. Thinking about how easy it would have been for that to be the end of it if I'd just gone home like most people would, because most people don't have access to databases or investigators or federal channels. Most people just shake it off and try to forget. And that's when I said, send everything to civil rights tonight. Months passed. Investigators reviewed thousands more stops across his patrol area. Statisticians ran probability models, reports got written, and the conclusion was blunt. The pattern wasn't random, not even close. Emails surfaced 2 messages where he bragged about being able to spot stolen cars just by looking at them, like intuition was better than evidence. And when that report went public, the gas station video leaked, and suddenly millions of people were watching the same 13 minutes I lived through, watching the cuffs go on before the facts came in. The department opened an investigation, suspended him, then fired him. His appeal lasted less than 15 minutes. Decision upheld, and eventually federal charges were filed. The trial took days. Testimony stacked up, data charts filled screens, and when I took the stand, I wore the same outfit from that night, same posture, same voice, and I handed the court a list of names, people who'd been stopped for the same reason. I was only to find out nothing was wrong. And it took several minutes to read them all, just name after name after name, and nobody in that courtroom made a sound. The jury found him guilty. Sentencing followed, prison time badge gone for good, and the city settled the civil case for a large amount with reforms written into the agreement. Monitoring systems audits, oversight changes that should have existed long before I ever turned into that gas station. I donated most of what I received because the point was never money. It was proof that what happened wasn't just a random mistake. It was a pattern that only looked invisible because nobody lined up the numbers before. These days, that footage gets shown in training rooms not as entertainment, but as instruction. And sometimes I think about how strange it is that the whole thing started with 2 digits swapped on a keyboard. Just 2. Something that could happen to anyone. And that's true. Typos happen. We all make them. But here's the part that sticks with me. The cuffs went on before the correction. Suspicion came first. Verification came later. And that order tells you more than any apology ever could. I still replay that night in my head sometimes. The lights, the silence, the weight of those cuffs. And I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't known what to do next. If I'd just driven home and let it go. If those numbers had stayed buried in a database nobody checked. And honestly, that's the question I keep coming back to. Not what happened to me, but how many times something like that happens to someone who doesn't have a way to push back. So I want to ask you straight up, do you think that was just one officer making a mistake, or do you think there are more stories like this that never get seen because nobody connects the dots? Tell me what you think. Seriously, I read the